Arc Raiders Shrouded Sky update might just be the biggest update we've seen to date for the game, so what all is new, what changed, and what should you know? Today we're taking a look at all of that and more, so drop your thoughts as we go along, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe for more Arc Raiders and other FPS content. I'd love to have in the community. Also, if interested, check out my friends over at Advanced GG. We just launched a new set of espresso-related items, which is actually really cool to say. Branded rainbow sherbet flavors and heavy-duty shakers available, linked below. But anyways, there's a lot to go over, let's get into it. First, let's start out with the main, larger content updates. The big focal point of this update was the new hurricane map condition. You're going to see this a lot. It is on rotation as of recording this every single hour for the foreseeable future. Now, this comes along with a handful of different variations to the gameplay experience. A couple of hurdles you're going to have to get over every single time you play. Firstly, shield degradation is going to be a thing here. This is going to chip away at any shield you have available. Off quick baseline testing, it looks like it takes about 1 minute and 45 seconds to degrade your shield by 25% of a light shield. So about 10% of that damage mitigation available, given that light shields mitigate 40% of each shot. Now, that'll also scale for medium and heavy accordingly, but it also degraded the shield by about 5% durability as well, which will compound more and more over time. So you can absolutely stay out in the hurricane for a while. Like, it's not something that absolutely shreds your shield immediately, but it will become a danger over prolonged periods of time. Being outside, it also is something that gives that visible cue that someone can see you off in distance, seeing your shield sparking over there. But thinking long-term over the whole raid, do you want to be recharging your shield all that much or repairing it post-raid? So it isn't something that will feel like a huge deal when you, say, are out there traversing the map for a minute or two at a time, but it's one of those things that, like, you're going to want to be conscious of, especially if you start taking gunfights with other raiders. So that said, is it worth taking your shield off while outside? Well, it might be. That's something you have to kind of gauge for yourself. Of course, you have no damage mitigation if shot at by arc or enemy raiders if you don't have a shield on, but you're also saving the durability of that shield, and you don't take any damage from the hurricane by default if that's the case. You also will end up seeing movement impacts here, definitely noticeable as well with those gusts of wind. If you're running towards the wind, it's going to be something that slows you down. If you're running with the wind, however, you are going to have that speed boost and feel a little bit faster here. Visibility is also something that is drastically changed here. Sometimes you'll have situations where you might come up on a set of arc that you just did not expect to see, and they'll be right on top of you. So just be careful of that. One other thing to note is that caches and their loot are actually changed here at this. It's mentioned that these are first wave raider caches that will have potentially some higher tier loot in it for you. This having a slightly different audio cue compared to the raider caches. The standard raider caches being like some ticking. This one, it sounds more like a digital tick versus an analog tick. But having chased a lot of these down here earlier in the day, they seem to share the same spawn points as their standard raider caches you see on any other sort of map condition. So if you want to use a tool like Metaforge or something like that, that's the one I use all the time that shows spawns for all these kind of things. That's where you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go for these. And it seems like, again, you'll end up having decent loot out of it. Some of it sharing the same spawns with other raider caches. I feel like I got more medical items than usual out of the first wave caches here in the hurricane versus just standard caches seen on other maps, but that might be just something that's kind of placebo, not enough testing. I did get a blueprint out of my first one. I did hear from some accounts reporting it that they've seen things like the Tempest blueprint in that, but I don't know that I buy into that just yet. That very well could be one of those things that's like someone just lying on the internet, but also haven't seen enough blueprint yields to know for sure. So who knows? Either way, listen out for them, loot them up while you can, and hopefully get some good loot out of it. The final thing we'll say about the hurricane map condition is I'm very confused by either the luck that I had or the loot pull in various containers that I pulled from a few runs. The most perplexing I had was 2 blueprints in 2 breachable crates in the back of a truck, not even in a high tier loot zone. So caches and generally anything may be worth doing in the hurricane right now. It's possible that loot pool may have been boosted by accident maybe, but anyways, just something I wanted to note. Next, we had 2 new Arc enemies here, the Firefly and the Comet. The Firefly will roam around in packs with other Arc and will burn you significantly if not taken out. It's like a more armored Hornet, but with flames instead of the electric shock. And the Comet, think Surveyor style roaming on the surface, where it doesn't have to be in just an indoor location, and it can just be kind of going and doing its own thing. But if it gets close to you, spots you, it's gonna explode like a more violent pop. so keep an eye out for that one. Both of those now actually have some of their cores required for some different crafting, which we'll touch on in a second. Next, we saw a map update for Dam Battlegrounds, dubbed the Control Access Zone. It's now the newest high-tier loot zone in Dam Battlegrounds. There's multiple different routes to get into it. The zip line on the sort of cliffside of the environment here by that one hideout, the new ventilation shaft, there's a ladder next to said ventilation shaft, a couple of different ways to get in there. Honestly, kind of a cool vibe to it. It feels like a large ventilation shaft or silo of some kind with multi-tiered levels of things you can explore. There's a battery locked room, there's a puzzle associated with said battery locked room and another locked location, and plenty of standard items to loot as well. The puzzle room, not sure if we just got lucky with the order in which we button mashed it, but myself and a few other randoms just ended up hitting the buttons all at once, 4 of them, and we partially figured out that puzzle room. There's a second locked door behind the first locked door that is kind of another roadblock there with this that required a lever pulse unit to get past that second door, so at least for me as of recording this, the mystery persists on what it's like in that locked loot location. Okay, espresso in edit, I got curious. Turns out those requirements are actually randomized, which makes this even more interesting. For some players, it's leap pulse units, sometimes it's batteries, sometimes it's a motor, sometimes it's arc performance steel or power cells. So that makes it pretty interesting for each run. Behind that door is apparently also 2 weapons cases, a grenade case, and a few other loot spots, but the spawnable items being behind a locked door and in a high tier loot zone should in theory be pretty solid then, right? Next, we saw an additional seasonal project being introduced here. This being the weather monitor system project, tasking with getting a handful of different things. None of them really seem to be anything crazy in regards to the requirements. Some people have already broken down on Reddit the all 5 tiers of this and the rewards, and unfortunately, not a lot of them are really all that great. They're more gameplay items versus like higher tier stuff and other maybe blueprints that you might be interested in. But this will be something that seems like it lasts a bit of time. Right now, there is no designated end time listed on this, and it's said to be a seasonal player project, so it may last until the next reset after the one upcoming, but not entirely sure there. One thing to note is that these sort of projects do not reset with the optional expeditions and wipes. So if you're interested in getting any of these sort of items, some of them do have some higher tier sort of rewards, like even the Vita shot on page 1. If you want to save the project for that, you can start it after the reset and go from there so that those rewards you get don't get wiped in just a couple of days. Just something to note. We also saw a new free raider deck, the Surgeon deck, where there's quite a few outfit options and variations along with additional smaller cosmetic items, raider tokens, and gameplay items revolving around healing. Again, it should be noted that those gameplay items will reset if they're in your inventory here in the next week. So whether or not you want to hold off on redeeming your deck, that's entirely up to you. The cosmetic items like the sort of outfits and the charms and everything that go along with that stuff's permanent and on your account even through a reset. So you can start unlocking those if you'd like, using up most of the capped cred you have. Obviously, it doesn't apply to you if you were above 800 cred when that soft cap was introduced, now hard cap, but you can unlock those, work your way back up for more cred towards that limit again, and then redeem the gameplay items after the wipe if you'd like to do that, since again, just like projects, deck progress does not reset with wipes. All in all, it'll cost you 1,170 cred to complete the entire deck in full, the full beard being the final page 5 and most expensive item reward at 150 cred. Speaking of, we end up seeing new facial hair customization. Again, one by default, one in the Raider deck, and then we also have another option in the shop available for those that want it. This probably being the first of a couple of different beards we'll see in the near future here, kind of just compounding and building on top of that, but that's available here for you as well. We also have 5 new quests introduced. It doesn't seem like anyone's accurately got the sort of at-large quest tree updated just yet, because as with what we saw with the Headwinds update when we got quests last, we didn't actually have immediate access to that from like Quest 1. A lot of those were actually tagged on to the end of existing quest trees, so you did have to actually progress far enough in your quest to end up getting some of those. We don't know where these ones are placed just yet, so it's possible some of these do not show for you, but we have 5 new quests to take part in, some actually granting a relatively worthwhile reward. I'm looking at Celeste and the Worth Your Salt quest reward of the Vita Spray blueprint. I'm hopeful that future quests have more worthwhile rewards like this, and that perhaps secondary and third run-throughs of quest rewards, things like blueprints, more instead of things like cosmetics that are earned in quotation marks again, but don't actually give you anything since you've already earned them. Like, you don't get the same charm twice. Anyways, we also saw the Expedition window now have a UI option here for this. It's going to be something that opens up as of tomorrow, so not quite something you can commit to just yet. We have a new layout for the Expedition showcasing that you have skill points that you may or may not be able to catch up on, a new total value showcase, a new and redone about page for the Expedition showcasing new details and what's kept versus reset, plus showcases of what permanent rewards you'll end up having. So quite like that. Also, one thing not mentioned in the patch notes, the patchwork outfit actually got updated here, where this looks like it's now the base one that we have for the first Expedition and not a variant just yet. But it's also interesting because one of the outfit variants as a permanent reward is listed as armor. So like, I have it already, haven't committed to Expedition 2, so it seems like it's the baseline, but we'll see. Talking quick little UI stuff, because I also don't know where I'm going to put this in regards to the other sort of patch notes. The Scrappy UI and what you end up getting for returning after each raid, those items that he grants you, that's also been redone as well in a new UI setting. We also have new shop items, the new Velour set for only 1,600 Raider tokens. That comes with a new outfit and a few different colors and additional toggles, as well as the new backpack option. And finally, Trials, that season is going to be concluding later tonight into tomorrow. So make sure you're ending up taking part in that if you care at all about those rewards. Truthfully, I think some of what we see in regards to the rewards for Trials are quite weak. I'm kind of questioning why I grinded so hard to get to Hotshot. I wasn't going to get to Cantina Legend because a lot of the rewards just, I don't think personally are worth it all that much for the trouble to go through. But anyways, that is your content-facing side of things here for the Arc Raiders update, but there's a lot of gameplay and balancing and stuff like that, changes that were made on that front as well. So let's firstly talk about weapons and weapon balancing. Firstly, they started out with some general dev notes. They said, in update 1.13, we shipped an update that included an optimization fix for our weapons, but as many of you noticed, this had unforeseen consequences of lowering the total fire rate of semi-automatic weapons. In 1.13.1, we reverted that fix, but something else made it into the update that shouldn't have. Many of you reported a shadow buff to weapons, and after investigating it, we found that 1.13.1 had inadvertently impacted our weapon input buffers, where you previously would have to time your inputs to the intended cadence of the weapon to reach its full potential. You could now instead spam click the button, effectively bypassing any skill requirement to learn the weapon's cadence. We want to keep some of that skill expression, but we also recognize that what we had previously didn't feel very responsive. To address that and land in some sort of middle ground, we have since added more levers for us to control the weapon input buffering window on a gun-to-gun basis, and we've adjusted the semi-automatic weapons accordingly. The weapons should now still be more responsive to fire when spam clicking, but the players who choose to pace their shots will see better results. In addition to these changes, we've also been looking into the balance between our low tier and high tier weapons. A lot of you expressed concerns that low tier weapons outperform our higher tier weapons at significantly reduced cost, and we're hoping to shift that balance a bit while still keeping some of that flexibility to punch above your weight if you're skilled enough. We're starting by reducing the overall TTK of the Stitcher and Kettle and increasing the maneuverability of the Aphelion and Jupiter. We're also taking a second stab at the Venator, which still seems to be dominating a lot of our PvP encounters. So in practice, we're gonna have to see how this actually equates out to the gunplay feel, if it's something that does feel natural or better, but at least as the time being, they're trying to find this middle ground for the fire rates of weapons, but also adjusting some of the base sort of values of regular weapons day to day. The Stitcher, we saw a reduction in the headshot multiplier from 2.5 to 1.75. That's where it really excelled against things like the Bobcat. The headshot multiplier, if you landed those headshots, you'd kill even faster. They also reduced the base damage from 7 to 6.5 and increased the per shot dispersion by around 50%, meaning that if you're holding down that trigger, it's going to bloom a bit more, a bit faster. The Kettle was reduced in its base damage from 10 to 8.5. The Venator saw a reduction in its headshot multiplier from 2.5 to 2 and reduced the base damage from 9 to 8. The Jupiter, it improved the ADS magnification from being 1.9 times to 2.2 times and improved the equip time from 1.2 seconds to now only 1.05 seconds. It also improved the unequipped time from 0.9 seconds to 0.75 seconds, so when you stow that weapon. And the Aphelion finally reduced its base reload time from 4.5 seconds to 3.5 seconds, reduced the time between shots from 0.9 seconds to 0.7 seconds, reduced the vertical recoil by 50%, and improved the ADS settle speed by 35%. Additionally, when it comes to weaponry, energy clips are now available by default to craft in the workbench. So this is something that will still, of course, take materials to craft, but you can end up crafting these by default, whereas previously you had to have legendary energy weapons unlocked to be able to craft it. One of those blueprints available, which now no longer is the case. As for utility, notably, weapon crafting and item value has been adjusted. Explosive items are where you're going to see this a lot, because these now require certain arc parts for crafting rather than their prior base of just 2 specific items, making explosives a bit harder to craft and perhaps lesser seen in the coming weeks. Some of them, though, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of a rework in the coming weeks, because the cost outweighs the benefit for some of these. Let's start with the deadline here. The value of this was increased from 5,000 to 6,000, which means if you sell these, you get a bit more bang for your buck. The trader price, though, increased from 15,000 to 18,000, making them more expensive to buy. They also, again, coming down to the crafting, changed the formula for these, where now instead of just explosive compound and arc circuitry, you need explosive compound, arc circuitry, and a comet igniter. So utilizing one of those new archetypes that we have with this update. The Trailblazer ended up having its value increase from 1,600 to 2,200. Its trader price increase was from 4,800 to now 6,600, which is an interesting price increase given that it was just nerfed against the larger archetypes as of a recent update, and it now requires a Firefly burner to craft on top of the synthesized fuel and crude explosives. The Wolfpack saw its value increased from 5,000 to 6,000. It reduced the cost for explosives to craft it and added a Rocketeer driver as a crafting item cost. So Arc Motion Core, Explosive Compound, and now Rocketeer drivers. So this is one of those ones that I think might be adjusted here in the near future, potentially, just based off the Rocketeer driver spawn rates in recent weeks, plus the effectiveness of a singular Wolfpack versus a Rocketeer. You're either having a 1-to-1 parity of what you're getting back a lot of the times for Wolfpack to Rocketeer driver, or not being 1-to-1. The Vitaspray had its value increase from 3,000 to 3,400 and added a tick pod to its crafting cost as well, now requiring a canister, tick pod, and antiseptic. And finally, the Showstopper had its value decreased from 2,200 to 2,100. It added a Hornet driver to its crafting cost now and changed the crafting components from advanced electrical components to just simply electrical components. So that now being something you can easily craft with your refiner, but still needing the Hornet driver and voltage converter to complete that. Now, before we get into some just general gameplay changes, one other sort of whole game affecting update that was made was something for anti-cheat. This is always an interesting topic. Some players will never see cheaters in Ark, inherently based off of how the matchmaking itself is handled. But just because one player or another doesn't mean that we can discount other encounters where they do exist in those upper brackets of the aggression matchmaking. Embark's prior system had gone in the way of 30 and 60-day temporary bans for a first and second strike, and then into a permanent ban, and until recently, it could have been bypassed by the Steam family sharing access systems. That has been since changed, and it seems like more are on the way, though WoW mentioned some big changes here. We don't know what constitutes some of those in the upcoming days. They said, when we last shared our update about tackling unfair play, we didn't fully convey the complexity and scale of what goes into cheat detection. Our defenses operate on multiple levels. Some checks are simple and definitive, while others are behavioral and data-driven and evolve over time. We also leverage broad gameplay telemetry and machine learning techniques to spot patterns that aren't obvious at first glance. These methods take longer to develop, must adapt as game systems change, and don't always offer instant certainty the way blunt software detections can. We've recently taken action against different exploits, and we are further tightening our rules and stepping up enforcement. Serious infractions now carry stricter consequences. Strong detections will receive permanent bans right off the bat, while others will receive a temporary suspension and a single chance to correct the behavior. Recent updates to family sharing have strengthened our ability to curb misconduct and streamlined the removal of bad actors, but we're preparing to launch a systemic manual review of ban appeals. The game is young and the volume of telemetry is enormous, but this process ensures every case is handled with care as we continue to learn quickly and invest heavily in the precision of our enforcement tools. Our dedicated anti-cheat team works tirelessly to keep the game fair. It's an ongoing fight, and we're committed to it. So the key parts out of this are, number one, stricter enforcement and consequences, removing that 3-strike system and going back to, at best for the cheater, a singular warning depending on the infraction type and how serious it is instead of the 3-strike method as we've seen recently. Otherwise, depending on the severity, it's a one and done. They're out of there, which I still think is the way that it should be approached always, but we're seeing some adjustments here with this. And number two, manual review of ban appeals. Less automation, if not completely removing it, allowing for a real human to potentially review your case. Something that other games isn't the first option here. So nice to see this, but of course, the fight always goes on. There definitely will be more updates in the future, but for the time being, that's what we have. Other notable gameplay changes. Firstly, on the gameplay side, they added a piano as an interactable object in the world. Personally, I didn't quite look out for a lot of these here, so as for spawn points, not entirely sure. It seems like those are the static ones, because obviously you're not bringing a piano into a raid in your butt. Keep an eye out for that. You might be able to play around with some of that in world. They prevented players from standing on or being carried by thrown grenades or other non-walkable items. And as we'll see with maybe another patch note that's of note, they also did change the sort of battery carryable things that people were doing, which is, I personally think, unfortunate. I don't think that it really was harming too much of the gameplay experience. I've only seen funny gameplay clips, so maybe I'm missing something, but those were changed. And they fixed an issue where a downed raider's body could block a hatch extraction by triggering a search prompt. Definitely nice, because when that happened, it was something that basically made that entire hatch unusable for the rest of the raid. Progression, you can now re-roll feats 3 times per day for free. They removed PvP feats, updating a few existing feats and adding a few new ones. So that means that there's now no longer any sort of pushed incentive to play for PvP. That's gonna probably rub some people the wrong way, but realistically, when you look at the in-game things like quests, all that kind of stuff that like it funnels you towards a task, the only thing were a few feats that pushed for PvP. So grand scheme of things, it doesn't change a whole lot, but just now know that if you are seeing PvP, it's for the love of the game. There's no incentive behind that other than to just kill a raider and take their stuff. They also added an expedition catch-up system, again, to earn missed skill points from your previous runs with an updated UI to track your progress, as mentioned. They fixed an issue where players occasionally did not receive a skill point as indicated in the results screen, that seemingly having to deal with the delay in those rewards, but fingers crossed it's actually fixed this time. And the candleberries in Bluegate now count towards the harvest plant trials. Maps, we saw some adjustments to Buried City, Stellamontis, and Bluegate. Buried City just decreased the rare loot in chimneys you'd find in the Bird City map condition ever so slightly. Stellamontis had multiple collision issues fixed in the lobby, atrium, loading bay, train station, tunnels, and seed vault that it prevents players from being out of bounds, and adjusted the night lighting on Stellamontis to improve visibility, as well as improving nighttime visibility for seed vault specifically. Bluegate also had one of those things where they fixed an issue where players could get out of bounds in the tunnels and improved thunderstorm lightning for better visual clarity. Now, will that get rid of all of the out of bounds stuff? Who knows, but positive push in the right direction at least. Utility, we saw pop triggers and spotter relays can now be used in the quick slots. The spotter relay can now deploy as a trap for nearby arc. The pop trigger can now be deployed to roll forward briefly before exploding. They added the shaker instrument as a new field crafted item. They fixed an unintended behavior with snap hook, causing it to pull players after it had been canceled, but that's something that people have already found new snap hook movement tech, so a band-aid on a cut, but another cut right next to it. And zip lines can now no longer be placed on carryable objects, again, like we mentioned a couple of seconds ago. Audio, Scrappy has been, well, toned down a bit. He doesn't cluck nearly as frequently now at this point, which, who's complaining about that? You gonna do Scrappy dirty? I want to have words with you. The birds perched on zip lines now screech with correct positional audio when startled. They decrease the audio occlusion and obstruction slightly across the board, and especially for players, so you'll hear those players in your vicinity a little bit clearer, and they updated the acoustic guitar music tracks. Haven't seen that just yet to test out, but curious for sure. The UI, we saw item pings for items on containers now appear above the container's interaction point and no longer appear at the wrong location in certain containers. They added a ready up warning when deploying with raider hatch keys into the map with no active hatches. So if you try and go into a night raid, electromagnetic storm, something like that that doesn't have hatches available, it'll now give you a warning. They added icons to inventory tooltips to show recycle and salvage outputs, which is definitely cool. Nice little quality of life feature that just hovering over an item will now show you what it breaks down into. And you can now use the mouse scroll wheel to switch between pages in the raider deck rather than having to click the button to progress and go along. They polished low health reaction animations for improved clarity, and finally they've reduced the erratic movement of arc parts when they're stuck to a looted item. That just being something that's a little bit buggy and kind of a first world gamer problem, but nice to have fixed. That among a number of different, like, more minor things you can see on screen, but just to save the monotony of being here for another 5 to 10 minutes listing off every single bullet point, that's the update we had for Shrouded Sky. In terms of quantity, it seems quite literally like our biggest update to date, which is definitely cool, but a lot of new stuff in regards to content, changes for gameplay and balancing, along with a general host of other fixes. It's a rather large update, so if you made it this far in the video, appreciate you. Let me know your thoughts down below, what you think of the update so far. Do you like what we've seen out of Shrouded Sky, the content, the changes? Let me know. If you guys enjoyed the video though, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Arc Raiders and even more FPS content. I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care. and peace.